Well, I just want to add a word of a warm welcome to all of you, particularly those of you who've travelled distances to be with us. It's a very important moment for us, I think. So we put it before, in a moment of prayer and quiet, we put ourselves before God and remembering especially those who are most in need. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. This is a prayer which comes from the World Day of the Poor, which was 2 weeks ago, an initiative of the Holy Father, Pope Francis. Lord Jesus, who became poor to enrich us with your poverty, we ask you to listen to our prayer. For the cold of the Nativity and Christmas night, remember those who do not have a worthy place to live. For the fear and insecurity of the flight to Egypt, remember migrants and refugees. Those who experience the burden of modern slavery. For the years of poverty lived in Nazareth, remember the many men and women that do not earn enough to support their families. For the pain that was caused to Mary and Joseph when you stayed in the temple. Remember those parents whose young ones have become embroiled in destructive habits, or who have been lost through kidnapping or modern slavery. For violence, injustice, hypocrisy, hatred, of which you yourself were an innocent victim. Make us understand that meekness is the pathway of justice, mercy, and peace. For the terrible hours spent in Gethsemane, help us to be close to those tempted to despair. For the sake of your death on the cross, help us to alleviate the suffering of the dying and to bring comfort to the bereaved. Through the intercession of Mary, your mother, who sang of Providence's work, especially in the humble and the hungry, help us to overcome our insensitivity and indifference. May the poor in our diocese experience through us, disciples of the risen Lord, the promise you want fulfilled through us. I am with you always to the end of time. This prayer we make through Christ our Lord. Amen. And the only other sort of little reflection, because I know time is, it's wonderful to see some of these kind of variety of speakers. And I want to thank all of them for coming and for the different kind of elements of the life that we're going to hear about. But just a few words from the letter to the Romans, and then I'll just say a quick word about it. People will not ask for the Lord's help unless they believe in him, and they will not believe in him unless they have heard of him, and they will not hear of him unless they get a preacher, and they will never have a preacher unless one is sent. But as Scripture says, the footsteps of those who bring good news are a welcome sound. So my one reflection as we begin this day is, I think we sometimes think of, to proclaim the gospel is what we do kind of in church and in terms of our preaching. And it talks about a preacher there, doesn't it? And so that's what the priest or the deacon does over there. And we think about our charitable good works, our loving service over here. But it's clear in the Gospels and in the letters of St. Paul that the two are never played off like that. And you know, it's always captured very, very profoundly in the lives of the saints. So that famous saying of St. Francis to his followers, preach the gospel at all times, and when necessary, use words. So what we're about today is the preaching of the gospel through deeds, and especially in trying to reach those particular needs that are in our part of the country, and linking that to a network which I know John Colby's going to come on to speak about, which exists in this country and indeed globally, so that we each have a sense of our contribution to the mission of the church in the loving service which we're called to give. And you'll know that, I mean, I'm especially pleased that we've got different inputs on these kind of, you know, 4 areas. Children and family life, those who are in need in terms of children and family life in our area. Homelessness, refugees and migrants, and within that umbrella we have to include modern slavery. And the 4th area we sometimes call the elderly and the isolated, or what I prefer in some ways vulnerable life, wherever life is under threat or vulnerable. It obviously includes the elderly, but it may include others too. So anyway, thank you again, all of you, for being here and keeping us on track. I want to say something about,
just very
to introduce John. Okay.
John Coffey is the Director of Caritas Westminster. We're very delighted to have John with us for travelling all this way down, as we say. And John is very experienced in Caritas as a whole. And the very fact he's here, I think, shows something about the intercommunication and between, you know, around the Caritas network as a whole and the mutual support. Just say it's great to have Kevin Gallagher with us as well, who's from Caritas Portsmouth, which we'll be working closely with Kevin in the future. John and I actually go back a few years, many years in fact. We studied together in Spain. We always seem to meet up in these exotic places. We studied together in Spain. We met again recently in Palazzolo in Rome, and now we're in Plymouth. John was a very key man in the Developing in Love in Action programme, which could well be of good use to us in the diocese, and John will allude to that. So, John, it's good to have you with us. Thank you.
I just need to work the... So that's what I wanted to cover this morning, was just to share a little bit of our experience in Westminster of how we went about developing Caritas, but also to give you a little bit of the context about why I think it emerged in Westminster 5 years ago. So we'll talk about where we fit in, what we do now, and a little bit about Love in Action, which is a parish programme of Catholic social teaching, which I know some of you may have seen and actually used already. And I commend it to you. And the bit at the end, the measuring impact, how do we know that we make a difference? That's something that I think won't really speak to, but I'll just say, in terms of our work going forward, it is something that we need to ask ourselves, is how do we evaluate what we're doing and show that we're making a difference to people's lives. So where do we fit in? This is a rather crude, I have to say, I'm not very good at putting PowerPoints together, but this is a rather crude construction for you. But you can see that we're part of a much bigger federation called Caritas Internationalis. Hands up in the room, who's heard of Caritas Internationalis before today? Well, that is, I have to say, that's very gratifying that many of you do know about Caritas Internationalis and what they do. They are, in effect, the Vatican's overseas development arm.
and they're responsible for developing capacity in lots of different countries across the globe to deliver the church's charitable activities. And we are part of that federation. Traditionally in Europe, and you have a Caritas Europa in Europe, which is part of that federation, you have Caritas in South America, and then you have other national Caritases, so Caritas Spain, there'll be a Caritas in Argentina, and in this country we have Caritas Social Action Network, which speaks to all the domestic issues on poverty, and then we have CAFOD, which everybody in the room will understand the work of CAFOD, and they speak on international development issues, and have lots of partnerships abroad with lots of other local organisations to deliver the church's charitable work in those countries. And then below that you have our diocesan Caritas and our Catholic charitable organisations, which form part of Caritas Social Action Network. So you can see that we are, as part of the Caritas organisations, we're part of that network. I don't know what that noise is.
Seagull.
Seagull. Oh, I should have known. So we're part of a much bigger federation, although very much in charge of what we do locally. So moving on in terms of the background. So some of you may or may not know that Pope Benedict wrote a letter. I think it was particularly focused on the English-speaking world about charitable activity. And he basically, I'll summarise it, he basically said it's the responsibility of the local bishop to have an overview of what charitable action and activities are being undertaken in the name of the Catholic Church in his diocese. And when he visited us in 2010, he really did ask, well, where is your Caritas? How do you know what's going on in terms of the Church's charitable work for love in your country? And I think as part of the reflection on that, we began to see the emergence of diocesan Caritas here in England and Wales. I mean, I think from Cardinal Vincent's perspective, when he first started to talk about this, and Bishop Mark may remember this, he referred to the diocese, its 215 parishes. In terms of its social action work, 215 corner shops, all doing really good work, but not necessarily knowing what each other is doing, not necessarily taking advantage of or optimising the networks that could exist between those groups, or making use of those cross-community and ecumenical links that also form part of our charitable activity. So, moving on. This is a quote, as you can see, from Des Caritas Est. So, as a community, the Church must practice love. Love thus needs to be organised if it's to be an ordered service to the community. So, for social action and charity to be effective, it has to be intentional and organised. But it can't just be left to the professionals. And I think you will, for those of you that have been following Pope Francis's work and discussion around Caritas, that's his message. Don't just leave it to the professionals. We have a place to be involved in the work of this, in this pillar of the Church. In another place in Des Caritas Est, Pope Benedict talks about the three pillars of the Church: word, sacrament and service. And as Bishop Mark has already alluded to, without those three pillars, there is no church. So one doesn't exist without the other. So therefore, in many ways, Caritas is more than just an organisational network. It's more than just an organisation. It's an ethos. It's how we practice. And how we practice love is the way Pope Benedict has described it. So what do we do in Caritas Westminster? How did we go about this? Well, we had some pre-existing services which we brought into Caritas. They weren't separate charities, but they were agencies which were present in the diocese. And we have lately created a new pillar called social enterprise, which is our development in the area of work. We are doing this because work reinforces people's innate dignity, and there's that whole range of support around work, which is very, very important for people's lives. So we've looked into that. But really, the main brief when we first started Caritas in Westminster was to strengthen Catholic social action in parishes. It wasn't to create a big bureaucracy. It was to work with the groups that already pre-existed, the groups of SVP volunteers, the SVP organising committees, the Justice and Peace groups and other groups. It wasn't to take over, and when I first started, many people did think, well, why do we need Caritas? We don't really need Caritas, we're already doing all this. So it's been a bit of a journey to help people understand that we are there really to coordinate and not to oversee, but to coordinate and have a sense of what's going on in the diocese in terms of charitable activity. So it was primarily we started by identifying what everybody was doing. So you geographically are a very big diocese. How do you know what's going on in Poole? How do you know what's going on in Penzance? I mean, it may not be important for you to know the detail behind that, but I think it's important to know what's going on, especially if you're doing things in the same areas, perhaps in the area of homelessness, for example. What can you learn from each other? How can you work together in solidarity? Those sorts of issues were being discussed when we first started. But also celebrating the contribution of the Catholic community in the world of charitable activity in the common good. And growing new projects, but also educating. So educating ourselves around the teaching of the Church, that body of work called Catholic social teaching. It's often called the best kept secret in the Church, and it is for a reason, because it's so difficult to do, and it is actually so challenging. Many of you will perhaps have heard of bits and pieces of it. Some of you may be very familiar with some of the themes of it. But there's a very large compendium of Catholic social teaching called the Compendium of Catholic Social Teaching. I commend that book to you. The opportunity for us, what we did in Westminster was to create 6 local networks. I'm lucky enough to have a team of people that work with me on this, that can work with groups of parishes and deaneries to develop those networks, to look at what's going on, to look at what social justice and social action work is going on across communities, both interfaith communities and ecumenically. And part of that opportunity was also where they had a heart to do something else or something new, to invite in expertise who could help them do that. So what I'm trying to describe is a relationship of facilitation and of support and of encouragement rather than management. It's not a management structure. I want you really to get that, if you don't get anything else from what I say today. Perhaps I'll just, where are we? Well, we've been through that. So, I was also lucky enough to have some resources at my disposal apart from people. So we have just launched a Caritas volunteer network, which is a digitally based surface where organisations can post their volunteering opportunities on the website, and individuals can register their interest, and we can match volunteers to projects. And it's a way, we think it's a platform that we can expand throughout in parishes, but also in organisations and across communities. We took that model from the Jewish community, as it happens, who we've been working very closely with. We also had a number of restricted charitable funds, which means that we can disperse money directly to those in need, and also fund some parish projects. So we've been lucky enough to have these resources at our disposal. I won't dwell on the direct services, because I don't think I've got time, but they're just so that you know what we're doing, we're delivering directly. When we go into a parish, when my teams go into a parish, that's our volunteers and our paid workers, parishes will often say, tell us what to do. We want to do something, we want to get involved, tell us what to do. And our response is, we can't tell you what to do. You might know, you will know better than anybody else what the needs are in your locality. But you'll also know better than anybody else what you've got a heart to do as a community. So our approach is very much, what are the strengths in your local community? How can you use those and put those at the service of the common good in that community? Rather than saying, oh, here's a survey that we've done. This is the index of social deprivation. This is what needs to be done. We're not a local authority. We're not the London Borough of Catholicness in that sense. Okay? So it is a question of that dialogue and that conversation with your communities about what they think needs to be done and how they can respond. One of the ways in which we've tried to do that is through this programme that I've already referred to as Love in Action. This is a parish programme on Catholic social teaching. It's really an overview. It's delivered over 6 weeks through the Eucharist. And we've got 6 themes there. There are lots of other things of Catholic social teaching, but these are the 6 themes that we've chosen because they work well, and they work within a framework which is not overwhelming. So the way this programme works is that the 6 principles are delivered through the Sunday Eucharist. And alongside that, there are take-home sheets, there are prayer cards, there are small group resources for reflection on a weekly basis. And then after the 6 weeks, that I should point out the parish priest or the deacon, or maybe somebody else, will speak to that theme on the Sunday as well. So the liturgy will be designed around that theme, and there'll be posters, and there's a lot of leading to these things. And then after that, there'll be an invitation to the parish to come together, or for those who want to come together, to think about how they might deepen their understanding of CST. And then after that, there's another workshop around discernment. Well, now that we understand the principles of CST, what can we do with it? And then you can get into that discussion about perhaps what needs to be done, what needs to be celebrated, what needs to be renewed in terms of your Catholic social. And we found that very helpful. The other advantage is that it's pretty simple to use, at least I think it is. And schools can do it alongside as well. But you don't have to do the whole programme. You can take a couple of things and explore those. Very, very flexible. And I'll refer you to the website, Step Forward in Love. All the information's on there, it's free, you can download it. Obviously we don't pay for the printing of the resources, you need to pay for that. But it is very, very accessible. So it's based around the pastoral cycle, which is some of you may know, which is See, Judge, Act. So you see an issue, you judge it in the light, or you assess it in the light of Catholic social teaching. What does Catholic social teaching say about this issue? And then there's a call to action. How do we respond as community? It's fairly straightforward and easy to grasp. This is just a picture of a parish in North Harrow, St John Fisher. They were a very active parish. They did Love in Action, and Father Sean Middleton, who was the parish priest at the time, wrote about his experience of using Love in Action last year, and he was featured in the tablet maybe 18 months ago. So they were an active parish that had a number of things already going on. But as a result of that, they're now doing even more. They've got 6 or 7, 8 more activities or groups that they are doing as a result of their work in Love in Action. I just won't dwell too much on this slide, because I think that my time is running. I've got 2 minutes, so I'll just very briefly say, thinking about engagement is really important. Often you can see there are 6 points on that cycle. People often go to point to action, so they jump from rate 1 to 5 without going through the other stages. And we've begun to do some serious thinking about how we start programs and projects. Because if you go from 1 to 5, the chances are that your project might go on for a little while, but it won't be sustainable. Because either you haven't got enough people, you haven't got enough passion, you haven't got enough commitment. So, for example, if we go to facilitating choice, which is point 4, that's really about telling people, this is what you get out of it, but this is what you need to put in. You need to understand what this is the commitment. If you want to set up a winter night shelter, this is what you need to do as a community. You have to be there to do this. So we do some real important thinking around that. And lastly, I'm really just going to say, there are lots of ways in which people can be involved in a project. They don't need to lead it, necessarily. They don't need to organise it. They can make the team. Or, for example, I'll give you an example. We have a month, in one of our parishes, we have a monthly tea party for all older isolated people. So we have drivers, we have sandwich makers, we have people who are there in the community centre to welcome, or we have people who take people home, we have people who provide the entertainment. Some of those people are there on the day, some of those people just pick an elderly person up and bring them, and there are others who take them home. There's lots of ways in which people can get involved. You just need to think through, when you're starting a project or an initiative, how that can be done. I know that's pretty simple stuff, but actually it is remarkable how sometimes projects start, and that thinking hasn't been, often by people on the far end of the archetypes there, who are the organisers. So if you're going to do something, think about all the different inputs that might be required to make it a success. I think that's as much as I'm going to say now. I said a little bit about impact earlier on. One more thing, last thing, which is really about the map. I talked about mapping, or referred to mapping, finding out what's going on in the diocese, so that you can have a sense of solidarity and working together on an issue. Well, what we've done is we've put all the projects on an interactive map, so that if people are searching the map, they can see what social action activity is happening in a particular place. And we found it very helpful. We also know that Caritas Birmingham has done the same. In fact, we borrowed this from Caritas Birmingham. So there we have it. Every Caritas will look different, because the demographic's different. We primarily work in an urban environment. You are living and working in both urban and rural environments. We're together in this, and that's I think, what is really important. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, John. And John will be with us over lunchtime as well, so feel free to approach him, ask him any questions. So we're now going to have the first of our presentations on the 4 priorities of Caritas. And firstly, Anne Donnelly of the Apostleship of the Sea, and then Mary Conway from Justice and Peace will speak under the Refugees and Migrants priority.
Yes, hello, thank you. I'd just like to, 10 minutes, so I'm aware of that. So I'm from Apostleship of the Sea, and some of you probably do know about the charity Apostleship of the Sea. So what we do is we, the friendly face really of the charity, we go on board vessels and we visit the seafarers as they come into port. And obviously this is a really important thing in the southwest because we have lots of shipping backwards and forwards into our ports. So I'll give you a brief history of Apostleship of the Sea. It was founded in Glasgow in 1920. So we have our 100-year anniversary in a couple of years' time. It was really started when things were quite different in the world to do with shipping. We had the largest merchant fleet in the world, and Apostleship of the Sea had hostels, which some of you might remember, in lots of big ports. These were supported by parishes, and the seafarers used to stay in these hostels for quite a long time. But now it's completely changed. Obviously with globalization, the ships have become larger, the crews smaller, the pay is less, very little turnaround time. They come in on the vessel, on the house, go back out again on the next night time, and a lot of people are employed from developing countries. So it's a completely different picture now as it used to be. It's a national and an international organisation. We have 18 chaplains working in the ports all the way around the UK. We are supported by a team of ship visitors, and we also in a few of the ports have rooms where the seafarers can actually come off the vessel for a short time, come into the room and access Wi-Fi, clothing, toiletries, things like that. And we do have a really good support from our local parishes as well. So the seafarer's life is a very lonely life. They're cut off from the family, so on the vessel for about 9 months of the year. And when I say developing countries, places like Indonesia, Sri Lanka, some parts of India. We have seafarers from Cape Verde on the west coast of Africa, and Filipino seafarers, which are the mainstay really of the seafarers. So their contracts are long contracts, 9 to 12 months sometimes. All their salary is sent home, and they get very little downtime. So what we do is just go along to the port. I mean, I make it sound like it's all we just sort of rock up to the port. No, we don't. We have to make sure that we abide by port rules. So we have to have our high-vis jackets, our hard hats, our steel-capped boots. And we find out we've got lots of links with people on the ports, the Harbour Commission, MCA, the Maritime Coast Guard Agency, and ships agents, and we work with them and find out which vessels are coming in, what the nationality of the seafarers are, and then we go and see them. So we go in all weathers. It doesn't matter what nationality, what religion, what background, not at all. We go and see them, and we stand at the bottom of the gangway and we say hello, or if you know any other languages, then you can say it in their language, and you say, how are things? And sometimes they let you come on board, and we go on board, we sit in the mess, and we chat to the chaps, because it is mainly men, and we find out what's happening, and sometimes they tell us their stories. And they haven't got much time, but we, whatever time they have, then we sit and we listen, and we do what we can. And the seafarers, the main thing is communication. They need to have this access to their families. So we provide Wi-Fi in our rooms at the port, but we also take them sort of reading material, things that they might need. Also, we have seafarers that are often admitted to hospital, and we get a call to say that someone slipped or they've got some sort of condition and they have to be admitted, and we go to the hospital and visit them there. They're in a obviously very difficult time for them because their ship goes off into the night, they don't see the ship again, and they're very sort of isolated, and they need sort of the support to make sure they've got communication with people at home. And if they need some recuperation, they're usually sent to a hotel, and we can go and visit them there and just provide that continuity really until they're repatriated. So I'm aware of the time, and I'm talking getting very fast. But unfortunately, what's been happening in this economic downturn, and I'm sure you're all aware of this, and as alluded to in the previous talk, modern slavery is very much alive. And modern slavery at sea is most definitely happening. And we have been involved with the fishing vessels mainly. We have been involved with fishing fleets that have come into the southwest to fish scallops, and we have found that there are men on there that have been tricked into coming onto these fishing vessels, passports confiscated. They come into Heathrow, bust up to, well, it's been on the borders of Scotland, bust up to Scotland, immediately set to work. No experience, some of them before, in fishing, not given any protective clothing or any training at all, and set to work on fishing vessels. And those of you who will have seen those programs about the fishing fleets know how dangerous that job is, and how appalling the conditions can be. And these men were not given any food, no drink, they became very sick. They didn't have suitable clothing on. They were literally trapped and desperate. And we were able to help them, support them, not to take them off the vessels. They came off the vessels, and we were able to make sure that eventually they were repatriated. Now, this was a few years ago. It was a company that we were working with, but they were working for, which was very unscrupulous. They were really, well, it was called Coffey. I won't go any further into that. That was his name. And unfortunately, these fishing fleets are there's not too many of them. They're in the minority, but the ones that are around can really, really damage people. And obviously, it's all about their overheads, so they don't care about these men that are coming through. And it's happened throughout the country. And because AOS is able to talk to our other chaplains, we've got a really good network, and we can follow them around the country, which is what we've been doing. And certainly, we thought that maybe it was a little bit easier in the southwest, but only a few months ago we had a similar situation where we had some chaps came into Sutton Harbour, and exactly the same. They had been mistreated. They hadn't had the passports taken from them, but they were literally trapped on the vessel. And they were involved in some injuries, which you probably read about in the paper, where they were very sick and transferred to the Derriford Hospital. Eventually, these men, who were Indonesian, have actually got help. They've gone back up to Aberdeen, and they've got help there through Apostleship of the Sea. So really, that's what Apostleship of the Sea is about, and it's something that, as an organisation, we are so grateful, because we wouldn't be able to do it without the support of volunteers and help from people within the parishes, certainly in this part of the country. So thank you very much.
Hello. I thought I'd let Pope Francis do most of my presentation. So,
migrazioni nelle loro diverse forme non rappresentano certo un fenomeno nuovo nella storia dell'umanità. Esse hanno marcato profondamente ogni epoca, favorendo l'incontro dei popoli e la nascita di nuove civiltà. Purtroppo in gran parte dei casi si tratta di spostamenti forzati causati da conflitti, disastri naturali, persecuzioni, cambiamenti climatici, violenze, povertà estrema e condizioni di vita indegni. La nostra comune risposta si potrebbe articolare attorno a 4 verbi: accogliere, proteggere, promuovere e integrare. Accogliere. Un'accoglienza responsabile e dignitosa di questi nostri fratelli e sorelle comincia dalla loro prima sistemazione in spazi adeguati e decorosi. Proteggere. Parliamo di milioni di lavoratori e lavoratrici migranti e tra questi particolarmente quelli in situazione irregolare, di profughi e richiedenti asilo, di vittime della tratta. La difesa dei loro diritti inalienabili, la garanzia delle libertà fondamentali e il rispetto della loro dignità sono compiti da cui nessuno si può essimere. Promuovere. Proteggere non basta, occorre promuovere lo sviluppo umano integrale di migranti, profughi e rifugiati. La promozione umana dei migranti e delle loro famiglie comincia dalle comunità di origine, là dove deve essere garantito, assieme al diritto di poter migrare, anche il diritto di non dover migrare. Integrare. L'integrazione che non è né assimilazione né incorporazione è un processo bidirezionale che si fonda essenzialmente sul mutuo riconoscimento della ricchezza culturale dell'altro. Credo che coniugare questi 4 verbi in prima persona singolare e in prima persona plurale rappresenti oggi un dovere.
Thank you, Pope Francis. As in Laudato Si, Pope Francis is speaking from a position of faith, but the message is addressed to all humanity. If you took part in any of the Share the Journey actions, then you have been part of the message to the United Nations, and the compacts will be finalised later this month. So where are we up to here in the UK on the 4 principles given to us by the Holy Father? Welcome, protect, promote, integrate. You will remember the outpouring of compassion in September 2015 after newspapers published a picture showing a drowned 3-year-old Alan Kurdi, whose family had fled the Syrian war and were trying to cross the Mediterranean. I really cannot show that picture. This is a toddler who's arrived safely on Lesbos. In the wake of the picture, David Cameron was forced by public opinion to increase the number of Syrian people that the UK would accept from 5,000 to 20,000. That's about a third of the capacity of Old Trafford Stadium. So how are people seeking sanctuary being welcomed into the southwest? People from the southwest want to welcome refugees. This is one way. The Vulnerable Persons Resettlement Scheme. Note that the little chapel on the beach at Lesbos won't be one of the people welcomed this way. This scheme is only open to people registered as refugees with the UNHCR and who are deemed to be the most vulnerable for health or other reasons. Most people seeking refuge remain in the countries nearby. For Syrian people, this is Lebanon or Jordan. Most councils in the southwest have welcomed families under this scheme. The council arranges accommodation, school places, English language tuition, etc. People welcomed have status and the right to work. Another pathway is the community sponsorship scheme, and as we say, we have a guide here today to tell us about it. Do visit their store during the lunch break. In this scheme, which is modelled on a Canadian system and was agreed by the government after much lobbying by groups such as Citizens UK, originally it was agreed as a way of safely welcoming more people to the UK than the 200,000 by 2020. But the government have actually gone back on this pledge, and people coming through this scheme will now count towards that target. So a group of people come together to take responsibility for sponsoring a family and take on many of the tasks that the council would have done under the Vulnerable Persons Resettlement Scheme. So people, the group have to find funding, they have to do fundraising, they have to find school places and agree them with the council. But as I say, please do visit the Abide store. So, Devon Refugee Support, Home Office dispersal of people seeking sanctuary. Now these are people who've come to the UK by different means, under their own steam. But Plymouth averages 300 people per year of up to 44 different nationalities who have arrived in this country by unofficial means. Devon and Cornwall Refugee Support in Plymouth, they provide advice, support, education, IT facilities and a friendly communal space. They have volunteers who fundraise, who bring in food and clothes, and various of our Catholic churches do donate already to GCRS. Devon Refugee Support in Exeter and the International Care Network in Bournemouth do similar work, but Plymouth is the only Home Office dispersal area in the diocese. Another positive option is to join the City of Sanctuary movement, a civil society movement, which brings people seeking sanctuary together with the settled community to welcome, advocate, and provide practical assistance. So Exeter has a City of Sanctuary, Bournemouth and Poole have a City of Sanctuary, Cornwall is a county of sanctuary, and we're trying to get a City of Sanctuary group of us going in Plymouth. So I'd just like to say about the reception of the people who come to this country by different means. The label refugee is full of preconceptions. We may or may not read newspapers whose headlines are constantly negative about people coming looking for our protection. And I would say what matters is the humanity of people, our sisters and brothers from one human family. A refugee, a person who was seeking refuge in Plymouth, said to me, "A refugee is not an identity, it is a life experience. Loss, grief and pain are not identities, they are life experiences." As Pope Francis says, these people are not just statistics, they bring their courage, skills, energy and aspirations, as well as the treasures of their own cultures. So they enrich the nations that receive them. And we mustn't be drawn into just talking about targets and numbers. So this is how people are treated some of people are treated in this country when they come by unofficial means. The housing they're given is usually very poor. They can be made destitute if their case fails, and this is destitution as a government policy. They can be detained at any time when their claim has failed or deemed not to have enough evidence. And I'm showing you a picture of the Verne because until recently this was an immigration detention centre. It's now been repurposed as a prison, but quite a lot of them are just as forbidding. So, UK is the only country in Europe with indefinite immigration detention. So if you imagine if you are detained, you have no idea when you are going to get out. So, also victims of trafficking find themselves arrested for immigration irregularity rather than supported. There's sometimes no distinction made. I'll take my glasses off so I can't see. Haven't even finished. Right, illegal. This is something we could all do. The term illegal is usually, is often given to people who arrived here under different means. Now, this was illegal 4 months ago in Saudi Arabia. This was illegal 50 years ago in the United States. Children of different ethnicities on the bus. This was illegal 500 years ago in this country. So, no person is illegal. As we can see, the term often obscures unjust laws. Pope Francis stresses everything is connected. Climate change causes, among other things, conflict over resources and poverty leading to mass migration, etc. But our lack of effective response, the globalization of indifference, also leads to a breakdown of civil society. It leads to human trafficking, yes indeed, but it also leads to the hardening of our hearts towards other people generally. It leads to a sickness of our society as a whole. It is the opposite of the common good. So the dominant narrative about immigration is of threat. The hostile environment, which is not a phrase dreamed up by newspaper headline writers, but a publicly stated government aim since 2013. So it's a matrix of policy and legal measures that make it ever more difficult for undocumented migrants to meet their basic needs, or to form community, or to indeed to enter into any kind of community. It criminalises many day-to-day activities, such as working or studying, renting a house or driving, and it makes it difficult to access basic services such as healthcare. We must ask ourselves, why has this dominant narrative proved so compelling even to people of faith? So, this is the dominant narrative: scarcity, that there's not enough to go around; loss of Britishness, or more specifically Englishness, or belonging; security, that immigrants, specifically Muslims, bring extremism. But we have a God who creates abundance, a God who is the source and ground of our identity, a Saviour that shows love drives out fear. So, what can we do? I would say, seek out the stories and allow our hearts to be broken. Seek out good sources of information and change the conversations in our communities. Get involved with the schemes and projects mentioned. Campaign for changes in the law, such as ending indefinite detention, allowing people to work, welcoming unaccompanied children from Calais. And then they will have life, and we will all have life, and have it to the full.
Thank you very much, Mary and Anne. And now, under the umbrella of Children and Family Life, Sheila Fernley is Chair of Catholic Children's Society. Thank you. Thank you.
I hate using these things, can everybody hear me? And if you can't, can you please put your hand up, because I'm tempted to wave my hands around as well. Is that better? Because, yeah, I find it difficult. The Catholic Children's Society puts all children first in our diocese. Our structure is that we are the only Catholic children's charity registered in our diocese. Our president is our bishop, and we have the Right Honourable Anne Widdicombe as our patron. We have 10 trustees, and we are always canvassing for trustees, so they are all volunteers. We employ 3 people: our course facilitator, a fundraiser, and an administrator that helps us do all of the things that I'm going to share with you today, and we would like to do more. And we have teams of volunteers across the diocese, and we would love more. But we, in accordance with the core values, as you've heard that word so many times just this morning in a short time, of love, justice and forgiveness, we aim to support families and strive to enrich the lives of others through the provision of things that most of us, and taking a real good guess here to say, in this room would take for granted. We put all children's first. 4.1 million children in our country live in poverty with their families. And Joseph Rowntree said over the last 10 years, there has been more working families that have struggled living in poverty and retired families combined, having sustained unprecedented fall in their living standards here in our own diocese. Sometimes we forget that those are the people in our schools and our parishes, our roads in which we live, or living in our town nearby. They all need some form of help, but who are they and how do they find it? Some children in the southwest don't have a bed, they don't have food to eat, they don't have shoes, they don't have clothes, they don't have a safe home. That's the truth. The percentage of children in the southwest is higher than anywhere in the country. 1 in 5 children live in poverty in our diocese. There are areas in our diocese that are extremely high. Cornwall is officially the poorest area in the UK, or one of them. In Poole and Bournemouth, there is children not standing in front of the speaker, Stuart, sorry. Alderney, Kingston and Hamworthy. The Society has 3 strands of work. I don't know if you've noticed, but all of us have spoken about 3 things that need to happen. Grant giving, the Good Shepherd, and patchwork parenting courses. Grant giving is our financial and often immediate support that we can give to families of faith or those of no faith in the diocese for essential needs. This year, as this year's closing in December, we've received more than 190 applications. We were able to help hundreds of families, and our funds have been able to be shared with those families up to right now, on the 1st of December, £32,000. We help families in real need for the basics, and this is just 2 examples. With their full permission, we are allowed to share with you. This is my all-time favourite. I think I'd first become the chair when this came in, and we got this letter, and the 2 children wrote back to all of the trustees directly and said, thank you, you might not be able to see it clearly back there, but they're holding their knives and forks, and the cook is in the background, and they said, we've just had our favourite dinner, roast beef. Thank you, we didn't have a cacao. CCS helped with the deposit for a rented home for this family, and they wrote very, very clearly and said, as a professional, I never thought I would ever be in this position, but through whatever happened in my family, we found ourselves destitute, and we were able to write to you to get some help quickly, and we were able to give them the deposit for a safe home for this family to go and live in the degree of safety that I'm guessing lots of it in this room just shut our door and feel that we are very safe. We move on then to the Good Shepherd. We like to get into schools if we can to help children, because the children are our adults of tomorrow, and everybody here will agree. If we can have the ear of a child and help a child think of others, about what others have that don't have that they have, and about those that are less fortunate. So make your love your end was our goal in schools last year with the Good Shepherd programme. We have parenting courses because, again, is there any parents in this room? A few? Is it easy? No. And does it get any easier? Because as they get older, they come back, don't they? So for parents and carers who want to be better parents and carers, to be better at enjoying their family life, and we're fortunate today we have our course facilitator Caroline with us. She's over there at one of our stands. Please talk to her, because helping children change lives forever. And often families say there's no help out there, there's nothing. They're worried that they will be caught into a social service system, or people will be judging them because they're not good enough. And again, please talk to Caroline and any one of the trustees that are here today, because it's about helping them enjoy family life when they need it. It's about understanding, being respectful and reciprocal within communication, a framework of encouragement and discipline, and reduce tensions for both the adult and the child, because adults can have a few strops and tantrums, I guess, can you? So don't deal with kids, yes. It's not always easy, but please go and talk. Parenting through the early years, parenting through the primary years, and parenting in those wonderful teenage years. Harmony and hormones, that don't go together really, does it? But we have them at schools and at day centres. We do charge, but we refund, because our funding comes from a legacy that we were fortunate to receive many years ago, through fundraising, through grants, and through people doing lots of things. I've met somebody today that ran the Rome Marathon for us, and she actually said it was a lovely experience, but then that's another story really, so if you do a marathon. But we would give the money back if enough parents and carers attend. So it's about being there when they need it. Our courses cost us £2,676 per course. So we need to generate money, we need to recognise that some families and carers need that amount of input, but to help them enjoy their children. I won't go into that one because we don't need to do all of the detail of that. But what has surprised me as the chair of a Catholic Children's Society is that I often meet people across the diocese that don't even know that we exist. And even this morning someone said, oh, I didn't know that the Children's Society has survived. We're not fostering, we're not adoption. But if you have ever used or know of anybody that has made contact with us so that we've been able to help people in essential need, then tell other people about us, because that's what we would like to do, to hear from people in our diocese that really need that help. We don't have a long application process. It can come into the office, it can be processed very quickly, and we can make sure that cupcake, that bed, that school uniform, that parent's shoes, that deposit is there in that family very, very, very quickly. We have fundraising, and one of our employees is a fundraiser, and we do lots of things. So if ever you thought about doing something for the Children's Society, again, please make contact with us. We do all sorts of things. I think I wanted to say, because we've been around this discussion of Caritas, perhaps from the beginnings of its formation and being thought about. And when we have our Helping Hands programmes that go across the diocese, that just thank you for being here today to hear what is going on in our diocese for all of the people that do need others to be there for them when times for them are so hard. So to go on helping children and families, for us at the Catholic Children's Society, means that we're getting at the core of family life. Going back to Pope Francis's words, to be able to improve and to protect and to keep those families together, that we believe being part of Caritas Plymouth will mean so many more helping hands, if all of that makes sense.
Thank you very much, Sheila. And now I'm delighted to say Dave Brown is with us from Cornwall, from St. Petrox, which has to be Cornwall, doesn't it, a name like that? Dave, it's great to have you to speak about homelessness.
I can just about see the clock.
Look at me and I'll do this.
Okay. So yes, my name's Dave and I work for St. Petrox. We're a Cornish-based charity. We work with homeless people. And last year we saw over 1,000 homeless people in Cornwall. That's just us. There would have been other people working with other homeless people on top of that. We see teachers, professors, IT consultants, all sorts of different people, a lot of young people. But you're more likely to become homeless, getting feedback, I'll stand back a bit. You're more likely to become homeless if you are, if you've suffered trauma or difficult circumstances as a child. Now, Cornwall Council estimate that in Cornwall there are 8,000 children currently living in households where domestic violence is taking place. Now those families are clearly going through a difficult time. There are police visits to those households. An estimated 3,000 households in Cornwall are visited by the police for domestic violence every year with children. And those children are tomorrow's homeless people. They are the people who are going to have mental health problems. They're going to have addictions, probably really bad addictions to alcohol and drugs. And that, I think, is absolutely terrible and sad for those people. You know, the NSPCC advert, the child sitting in the corner, shaking with fear and sadness. Well, that is, you know, tomorrow's homeless person. When they grow up and they become 18, somehow or other people don't see the child in them anymore. I know everybody in this room does, and that really makes me feel quite warm that there's a lot of people here that are going to potentially help that child, that adult, the adult that becomes from that child. Relationship breakdown is the primary reason for homelessness, and that could be a child being evicted from a family home. That could be a wife falling out with their husband. And whilst it's the primary reason, normally behind that reason there are other things going on. And I've lost count of the amount of times that a young person has walked into St Petrock's. They've got their bag behind them. It normally weighs a ton. It's normally rather damp and wet, smelly inside, because they've been trudging through the rain for longer than they would have wished. And they walk up to the counter and they say, hello, my name's, I'll use the name Dave, because I'm called Dave. My name's Dave, I've become homeless. My mother has thrown me out, they've kicked me out. And you ask them back for a cup of tea in the back room, cup of tea and a biscuit, and they'll explain that they've been thrown out of their house not because of that's something they've done, but because of something their mother or their father is doing. It might be that their mother has an issue with alcohol, and in a fit of alcoholic rage, she's asked her child or told her child to leave the house because they've not done the washing up, or because they've done something very minor in their life. We had two twins come through the system a while ago, and the first twin left home of his own accord because his mother and father were involved in criminal activity. And we housed him in one of our 85 bed spaces, which we have. And he managed to get 7 or 8 O-levels, GCSEs I think they're called these days. He managed to get 7 or 8 GCSEs, and we kept hold of him, kept him in our house. He did his A-levels, and off he went to university. His twin brother became homeless because he followed in the family's profession, if you like. And he fell out with his family over the activities that they were getting involved in. And we housed him as well. He was a lot more tricky. He had more mental health issues. He had behavioural issues. But we managed to help him too. Now, I'd say this to school children when I do school talks. And I ask them, who do you think, how many of you here think that the first twin, how many of you think that it was his fault that he became homeless? And none of them put their hands up at all. And then I say, how many of you think that it's the second twin's fault that he became homeless? And they all start, going like this. They can't make up their mind. I don't think it was. I'm not even sure if it's his parents' fault that they find themselves in the situation that they find themselves in. So how do we respond? How do we respond to this continual flow of new homeless people onto the streets? Well, we have a response at St Petrops. We have outreach workers. We've got 7 outreach workers who respond to StreetLink referrals. If you see a homeless person, you can dial StreetLink. You can Google that, find out their telephone number. The outreach workers use contacts that we have in the community. And many of you, I know that 1 or 2 of you already are contacts, but some of those contacts might be the local pasty shop owner or the fish and chip shop. And they will know who's homeless in their village or the town that that shop is in. So the outreach workers are going around and they're assessing people, they're trying to work out what they can do for various people. So when I was an outreach worker, I used to find myself in, for instance, the Sainsbury's car park in Bude. I would ask the homeless person if they could to meet me up there, or I'd meet them wherever they were, and we'd drive up there and we'd sit in the car in the pouring rain, maybe with a flask of coffee. I might even go and get a bag of chips from the chip shop. I think I've had too many bags of chips from the chip shop. And we would sit down with the computer and we would together do an assessment and try and find out what was going on with that person. And from there we can find out how we can help that person. So we have various links with partner agencies and community links, lots and lots of people out there who want to help. And the more and more linked in we are with our communities and our fellow charities and everybody who's out there, the greater the chances that we're able to help someone, to find a solution for that person. We've got 2 resource centres. They do essentially what the outreach worker does, but they're in 2 places, Truro and Penzance. And in Truro at least, there's quite a big place. Every year we do a thing we call cold weather provision. It's actually a winter night shelter. Last year we had 91 individuals at that winter night shelter, and we were able to rehouse 60 of them, people that came in. And this year we've reopened a night shelter in Penzance, in our centre in Breadline. It's been running now for 4 weeks, and I was there the other night. There's a chap, the BBC were there, in fact, they were interviewing people. It's amazing what people come up with when they got a camera in their face. And this chap I've known for a long, long time, and I know his history. And the BBC, they said to him, how long have you been homeless? And his response was, I've been homeless since I was 5. He said, my mother died when I was 5, and I went into care. And it was that moment, that's the moment he cites as being a homeless person. So he went through the care system, he left the care system at age 18, and he's been on the streets ever since, in and out of various accommodation, but he's largely been on the streets. He has addiction issues, and he said all of this on the camera. I'm hoping that they're going to, if you look out for it on middle of this week coming, you might spot it on Spotlight. But most of all, I think our response is about caring. It's about caring for those people. It's actually about giving love and kindness. And the more people that we have involved, the more personalities there are. It may be that I meet someone and, for the best will in the world, I don't get on with that person. We don't click necessarily. But if we've got another 5 people to choose from, one of those 5 will probably click with that person. We have volunteers who come in, they give out food, They do various things, it just fold blankets sometimes. But if they're in the building and they're active in the building, then sometimes it's that person that the homeless person is able to talk to. And that's where the strength lies. And all of you in this room today can have a small input into that. So, thanks for inviting me in. And I was slightly more nervous than I thought I would be. But yeah, thanks so much for inviting me in. And I'll see you at lunch and during the workshop this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dave. It's all very frontline work, isn't it, that these people are involved with? It's fantastic. Bishop Mark, I think you're involved with St. Petrops as well. You're a patron of that. Good, so the final umbrella, if you like, is the elderly and isolated people, and Simon Coombs from SVP is going to speak to us.
Sorry about that. So I'm Simon Coombs, the President of the SVP Plymouth Central Council. I've had that privilege to hold that position for nearly 5 years now. About the SVP, I'm sure I don't need to say too much about what we do, because I'm sure most of you know already, but obviously an international Christian voluntary organisation dedicated to tackling poverty and disadvantage and providing practical assistance to those in need, irrespective of faith, ideology, or creed, or gender. Here in Plymouth, we've got about 150 members, 15 conferences, and our core work is befriending, really. We go and visit people, and the elderly and the sick. Some of our work. Locally, as I say, we help in food banks. We've got this furniture and charity shops in areas of real deprivation. There used to be a charity shop in Plymouth, the SVP in St Budo, but unfortunately it had to close 2 or 3 years ago because of lack of income coming into it. We visit the sick, give grants. We have special funds nationally where we can give grants to young families and children or asylum seekers. Usually the local group or conference is asked to gives part of the money themselves. We assist refugees and asylum seekers. One of our central council, our secretary, he works with Devon and Cornwall Refugee Support, and we gave him a grant earlier in the year, so he buys food for really destitute asylum seekers. Visits made by us, nationally we made 191,000 visits from March 17 to March 18, and 2,340 visits made in the Plymouth Central Council area. This amounts to approximately 40% of all our visits. We also visit families, prisoners, people in hospitals. I looked up what the definition of loneliness by the Campaign to Own Loneliness is, and that was it. It's sort of quite a posh definition, but that's the definition. So what does loneliness relate to? Well, this is sort of stuff we know already, really, but missing a spouse, sibling or best friend, when someone lacks a wider social network. It could be temporary, situational or chronic, where someone is really, really lonely. And that's from the Campaign to End Loneliness, that source. harmful effects of loneliness from the campaign's current research is mortality rates. Loneliness and isolation is comparable to the number of people that have obesity, and lacking social connections is as damaging as regular daily smoking. Thought to increase the likelihood of mortality by 26%. Obviously, social networks and friendships help reduce the risk of mortality and heart disease. And risk factors that contribute to loneliness and social isolation, well, we know most of these are poor health, loss of senses, mobility, lower income, bereavement, retirement, and becoming a carer. Other risk factors: lack of public transport, physical environment, poor housing, fear of crime, high population turnover, technological changes. Just before I've just finished with a couple of case studies from the SVP, I just want to say that the SVP is also, we do a lot of work overseas. We send money to other twin groups in India, the Sudan, Romania, Grenada and the West Indies. And we have quite a few conferences twinned with Kerala in southwest India. And as you probably know, in August there was a terrible flooding in that area. So we thanks to the local priests and parishes, we fundraised, and last week I found out that we've raised nearly £370,000 towards that appeal, which is no mean sum from the SVP. We also have a youth arm where we encourage sort of what we call mini-viddies in primary schools. There's one in this diocese at the Cathedral School in Plymouth. We're trying to get some more in this diocese, but around the country there's quite a few of these mini-viddies. And then they leave primary school and then they go on to another group of 14 to 18-year-olds. And then there's the 1833 group. So we're trying to get the SVP members of the future. So I'm now going to finish with a couple of case studies from the SVP, which are real life stories. I think it was the third week of being in the SVP. I was waiting for Ian, who was going to keep an eye on me as a new member during my first visit to an elderly gentleman, Mr. Mercer. As I waited, my original worries returned. Was this SVP thing really a good idea? Visiting old people at 7:30 p.m. on a Monday evening and disturbing them at the time when they would rather be watching Coronation Street or EastEnders. As I walked to Mr. Mercer's, I remembered that on the 2 previous weeks, as we had been brought into the sitting room, the people we were visiting had respectfully and possibly reluctantly switched off their TVs. We arrived, half an hour after our usual visiting time, rang the bell and waited. After a few minutes, Mr. Mercer, frail and visibly upset, opened the door. The sound of the television could be heard in the background. So I was correct in my worries, I thought. I must tell the others about this awkward visiting time. Then to my surprise, Mr. Mercer leaned his forehead against the wall of the hall, and with his shoulders shaking, he started to sob quietly. "Are you all right, Mr. Mercer?" I said. Yes, he replied. "I just thought that no one was going to come to see me tonight. Our visit may be the only contact someone has had with another person since the previous week. This is a moving testimony to how much it is appreciated, even if we feel that we aren't doing very much at all." And the last case study is headed across the waves. Molly had married an American and spent much of her life in New York. After her husband's death, she moved back to England thinking the change would do her good, despite having no family here. She made a few friends, but none were close. Over the years, she also lost contact with her American friends and their connection to the past. Molly, who was now in her late 70s, became very low, assuming that many of the people she used to know had moved on or died, and had no way of contacting them. Anne, a local SVP member, heard of Molly's plight and went to see her to offer her friendship and to see what she could do to help. Anne spoke enthusiastically about her life in the Big Apple and wistfully about the friends she had made there and with whom she had lost touch. Anne offered to help Molly track down old friends with the aid of the internet, something that Molly had not previously considered. Within a short time, Anne was able to find Kathy, someone to whom she had been close many years before. She also helped Molly exchange emails with Kathy, and the two friends are now in regular contact, sharing news and reliving the past. Molly has found a new lease of life, and her feelings of loneliness have given way to a new confidence and zest for life. So, that's just two examples of what the SVP do around the country. So, I think, as I had the rumbling tummy slot, I think I better finish now. Thank you very much.